it, or how do we proceed?
Yep. What do you think about the previous year? We have started Educathon'19 with together. What do you suggest? What do you share with us about that event?
About last year's event?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that it was very well timed, I guess. No one could foresee that we would be in the situation that we are in presently, but it was, I think, fortunate for everyone that you guys organized the event last year, because it laid the foundation for doing it this year. And it's really critical that people start working on designing and developing solutions to remote education issues. I mean, AR is one possible tool, one method there. So, I mean, I think last year was very important that it happened, because it made this year possible. And this year, the event is, I think, of obviously critical importance.
I mean, we are more experienced for that one. Yeah, we have learned a lot for the organization and the all stuffs. I mean, we get better prepared for this year. I mean, but the pandemic process,
yeah,
distance learning for the topic. Shall we start?
Yeah, if I can share my screen maybe.
Yep. You are a co-host now. You can share.
Okay. Let me see. All right. So, can you see it? Everyone can see the slides.
Yep, we can see.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. First to the entire MECTEP team for inviting me to speak today. I like we were just talking briefly before we started the presentation that last year we worked on an AR hackathon for education, and AR is just one possible tool, to solve some of the problems that come up with remote education, which I think everyone now has to address much more so than anybody thought they were going to. So yeah, thank you again for letting me come and talk. So jumping right into it, I'm going to talk about what the current use of AR and VR is practically, and then kind of talk about why that's lacking in some ways, and really what an educator has to consider, or an administrator has to consider, before making an investment of resources in either immersive technology. But first, let me introduce myself. That's a little different than last year. So I'm a research and developer of XR. XR is the term that covers augmented virtual realities and mixed realities some people use as well inside. So I do a variety of things now, and I was doing them before, but since the quarantine, I've been doing them all the time now. So I organize every week since early March explorations of multi-user platforms in VR, usually for collaboration, sometimes for event hosting. But my research area, I'm a PhD at Koç University, and my research area is collaboration in shared virtual space. So education falls under that category for me. So we often are exploring platforms designed specifically for education, and I'll show a couple examples of those in this presentation. But education can be for K to 12, it can be corporate trainings, it can be a lot of different things. And I would say different types of trainings, different types of educations are more suitable for what is currently available in terms of AR and VR solutions. In addition to research, I also educate. I teach interactive software design and development to kids, and I also teach immersive design, but more usually for university students than kids, though there's a picture of that. And I also develop, so I do a lot of cultural heritage stuff. This is a little Göbekli Tepe VR project that I did over a few days earlier this year. I took the pictures of it last summer, but just in an afternoon, you can create this experience where you can go on site and stuff. So in addition to research, I also still actively develop. But so what does it look like if you want to have, if you want to convert your education, your curriculum, your class to VR? What does it look like? Here's a picture. This is not the only way it can look, but this is a class, a computing class. You may see a little drone here. So I don't know why there's a drone in a computing class. I'm not entirely sure, but this was a university in Singapore, and it's taking place in a platform called Rec Room. Rec Room is free. Rec Room actually is a really sophisticated platform that supports desktop and tablet. I don't know if it supports mobile phone. I don't think it supports mobile phone, but it does support desktop, tablet, and VR, and a variety of VR, like quality, expensive VR headsets. So we'll talk about in a second why that's really important that they support all these different platforms, but they are really intending it to be a VR platform. And they can have, you'll see in this picture, they can have about 35 to 40 people active in an instance with bodies, with hands being tracked, but fully in VR. And VR is more demanding. So that's normally about the limit. And the thing about Rec Room is, I will just say, because we're in Turkey, one of the founding team members is a graduate of Boğaziçi University. So Rec Room is a great platform to take a look at. It has kind of a cartoonish aesthetic, which is one reason why it's been slow to be adopted by corporations. But now corporations are starting to put trainings and showcase events inside this platform because it's really a very strong platform. However, we'll see some other examples that are higher fidelity. But when we talk about what does education in AR look like, it's really, really different. So this is an example of a project that came out in, I want to say 2018 in Turkey, in Istanbul, led by a local team. This was done for Başşehir University STEM Center for their early learners. And so with the phone, you look at this image in one of the books that they're selling, and this animation pops up, and it became quite viral. Kids really liked it, but there's a cool thing that always happens in these AR photos. So I want to, like, which one is more marketable? This one, and people have smiles, but they're not, they're not real faces. Here the kids are like crazy happy, like they're really, really excited. But the trick is the kids can't see that. That little kid here, this animated boy, none of the kids can see that boy. It's just a trick of marketing, because you can only see that through a phone screen. And that tends to be what gets people really excited about AR. Going back to Magic Leap in 2016, is that it's much easier to market. You can put a smiling child's face without really identifying that the child isn't seeing that unless they look through a tiny screen. So we're going to talk a lot about both of them, but basically these technologies are often not exactly how they're marketed. So an educator has to be aware of that. But why are we still talking about them at all? Why are we talking about XR when we know that, well, it's not standard. It's not something that's really widespread. It's not like a learning management system, which is now a normal thing. It's a standard. But XR is not. And the reason we still talk about it is because it has this wow factor. So here's a couple examples. Engage is another platform, a VR platform that also supports desktop. So you don't have to have a VR headset to go into it. And they worked with a number of universities. They are one of the original education platforms in VR. They were specifically targeting university education and high schools back in 2016 and 17. They were too early. Those institutions did not invest. But this company, was invested. They received a lot of investment. They're still around. And what they show is, this is from Oxford University, or Oxford, one of the colleges in Oxford. And they're showcasing something with a cannon that's blowing up part of the room. So when you're in VR, you're in a room that's blowing up. It's obviously very attention grabbing. It's very impressive. And like I said, that's a wow factor to that. It's like you go home and you tell people, wow, I was in a room that blew up, It really showed me something, it really visualized, it brought to life something. On the other one, this virtuality shirt, I really like the name. I've always loved this name. And I think it's a really cute thing. So here's a real AR experience in education, because you have this kid in the bottom right corner with a tablet looking at his friend, and on top of his friend, more or less scaled to the size of his friend, or just anatomic visuals. And it works pretty well. It maps up pretty well into that shirt. It's quite simple. But obviously that's kind of a wow factor. You can go home and tell your parents you saw the inside of my friend, and he's still alive. But the thing is, that gets boring. On all honesty, like, there's a wow factor, but that wow factor doesn't last very long. It's subjective. It lasts longer for other people. But looking at some of the same platforms like an Engage they got dinosaurs everywhere. They've got giant stuff everywhere. They're bringing in photogrammetric scans, which are just high quality scans of cultural heritage sites. But once you've seen them a few times, you're like, okay, I get that. What else? What am I doing when I'm here? I can see it, but it's big. Yeah, all right, you've sold me. What else? And kind of similarly, Google has this AR app now. You can put animals all over the place. So you can put a tiger in your room. Again, it's cool, and you can put different animals. But once you put a couple animals, there's just, now it's like, but what else? How does this integrate into something? And that's a problem, because oftentimes there isn't anything else to this. It's just the visualization. It's just that initial wow factor. So, but these platforms, despite the fact that they may be underdeveloped, they're still getting a lot of attention now. But they're not all getting attention in the same way. What often determines whether you choose a really powerful platform with a lot of educational content, with strong interactions, is not whether you really want that or you're going to use that, but simply, can my students get there? Again, whether they be children or they be more adult corporate clients, or these types of things. Accessibility is the main thing we're thinking of. And what we tend to do is we end up making a lot of compromises then on what we're doing, what we're delivering to students. We are willing to sacrifice in order to get them in that experience in the first place. This is a platform called LearnBright. LearnBright is a web VR experience. So you access it from your browser. You can do it without VR, or you can put a VR headset if you happen to have one. But it's actually designed mostly not to use a headset, because they want the largest number of people possible to go inside it. They're not the only platform like this. This is another one called Verbella. Verbella is also a platform that often, it says it's VR, but it actually doesn't want, it's not trying to be VR. It's not supporting that very much. It actually wants you to go into desktop. And the reason is because more people can go into it, and they can have more people in a room. So that is, even for someone like Stanford, because Stanford has a program in Verbella right now. Even though Stanford, and this is not even a degree program, this particular thing here is just a certificate program. So it's purely a profit, initiative within their business school. Even in their case, they're looking at, we need to have the largest number of possible students supported by a virtual platform. So rather than a more developed VR platform, like an Engage or like a Rec Room or some others we'll look at, they would prefer something like Verbella, because Verbella can support a couple hundred people in the room on desktop, not on VR, but on desktop. And so, of course, you can monetize that much more. And so I can say that in Turkey, I have pitched for or created proposals for 2 or 3 different large-scale learning or conference event style platforms for disseminating information. And they want VR. The clients are often thinking about VR, but what they need, what they really prioritize, is hundreds of users. So then VR is not viable here. And so you have to go with something like Virbela, but Virbela is about $20,000 to my understanding, if you want to have something like a private little campus for yourself. So it's cheap, but not cheap enough for some people. Even though these platforms like Virbela or LearnBright are designed to be as accessible as possible to the widest number of possible users, the reality is these are new tools, and people don't know oftentimes how to use them. Even something that's designed to be very intuitive isn't intuitive for everybody, and that creates a lot of frustration. But the thing is, the expectations that students and educators and that people have are often a little unfair to new platforms. Because here's a school. This is a physical school. It has a pretty innovative design, and the reason I picked this design, this image to show, is that it looks like stuff you see in VR. You have this type of room here that's not really supported. You see a lot of things like this in VR because you don't have to worry about physics. This is a very complex, very, I would say, busy environment. If I'm a student and I'm going to this school for the first day, I need to be oriented. Someone's got to walk me through, what is this space? And where am I supposed to go? And how do things work? Where are the bathrooms? What's a class? Where should I not be? There's a lot of things that I would have to be told, and I would know that. And I understand that that's going to take me some time to understand that here. There's an onboarding process, and it just takes time. But when we work with tools, digital tools, oftentimes the users don't have that type of patience. They expect to be comfortable very quickly, in minutes, if not instantly. And that is inherently difficult for like a VR platform, because a VR platform is a new space. So you might hope, if you're a developer of a VR platform, that a user would say, hey, it's just going to take me a little while. I'm not going to understand it right away, but eventually I will. So I'm just going to be patient, be open-minded, and I'll get into it. But from personal experience, that's not the way it works. People get very, very frustrated when the digital tool they're using doesn't work. And this is a big barrier, not just for students, but a big barrier for educators to use these types of tools. Helping to understand who the tool's being designed for is
Michael, I think your internet connection is unstable.
essential for lowering. Here's another. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So here we're looking at another image from ENG. So this is a platform that, honestly, I would say it's not entirely clear who's meant to really benefit from this platform, this education platform. So if I'm an instructor, well, this seems fine. This seems comfortable. I'm on stage and I'm delivering the same thing I've always delivered. I've got a PowerPoint behind me. I've got my, I have a body, my hands are moving, and I can gesture. And there's my audience. So this might be a good platform for me, and it might be intuitive. But from the audience's perspective, this is incredibly boring, because this is just a standard experience. I have to have a headset. I've got to go through a sign-in, and I can't move very easily. So, if this is a tool designed for me, it's not really offering me that much. And again, going back to, that's a problem with a lot of these platforms, whether they're AR or VR, is really understanding who's meant to benefit from this. Is it the educator or is it the student? And it's not just in education, that's true outside of education too, but particularly in education, because there's a very clearly defined relationship between educator and student. And there are expectations that come from that. And they're not always satisfied when you put them in a different context, like a virtual context. The more successful types of tools are things like clickers. Now, I'd never heard of that until a couple years ago when teachers told me, hey, it's a great tool. It's really helpful. Like it just, has a very clear, very simple value proposition. It has a purpose. And who is it for? It's not for the students. It's for the teacher. Now, the students get a benefit, perhaps. They see some, but it's for the teacher, the educator, to more quickly just collect assessments, collect answers. The fact that it's put up on a screen, there's a lot of different ways you can put things up on a screen. The real tool and the value is it's a tool for managing that class more efficiently. And that's what's important, that it knows exactly its purpose. In some of the platforms like we just mentioned, they don't know that purpose specifically. They're trying to be too many things, and that's hard. Another example that I think is quite good, actually, is this Secret of Puff and Cove. We showed it last year, and it was an early demo stage. It's developed a bit more. This is an immersive VR language learning program, particularly for, I think, English right now. But this is for someone who basically wants to learn highly contextualized a language. They're put in an environment and they have to speak, and they're fully immersed in an environment where the conversation that they have to engage in, and they have to speak because it uses speech analysis. Everything makes sense. It's not like, role playing in the same way, like there's a book and there's another student and I have to pretend, even though the context of it's still the classroom, I have to pretend to be something else. This is really effective for role playing learning. So, it's good at what it does. And one other reason why I bring this up is because the company behind this is actually looking for developers in Turkey and places like Turkey to develop on this. They would be willing to share their SDK. If local developers adapted it for the local market, they would be willing to sell the license. So if there's any developers who are interested in language learning, this is effectively fully functional. It would need to be adapted for the local market. So I wanted to bring attention to that team because they let me know about that a few months ago because they knew that the Educathon was coming up, and they were really excited that maybe someone in Turkey would be excited to bring this to the local market. So talking about why we would choose, like that you have to have a clear use case, clear purpose for a tool. Well, what is an example where a VR tool or an AR tool is most likely to be successful? We need to understand what they are offering. And the basics, they maybe will offer more value, but the basic value in the context of education is that VR replaces the teaching environment, whatever that environment is. If it's the classroom, it replaces the classroom. If it's at home, if it's for a student who's at home, it replaces their home. So it changes the learning environment. For AR, it enhances that environment, which is either the classroom, or if it's at their home, it enhances their learning environment of the room that they live in. But you can understand that there's a certain limit then what AR can do, because if that environment is not very conducive to learning, AR can enhance it, but it can't change it completely, which means that that's a bad environment. All right, well, AR's got a bad environment that it's working with. It can only be so much better. And so that's an inherent issue. If you're in the classroom, AR makes sense because the classroom is designed as an effective learning environment. And I would say VR doesn't make a lot of great sense for a classroom place because the classroom is a great learning environment. But if it's meant for a student who's not in a classroom, well, then AR is probably not that great because maybe it's in my kitchen table, and that's not a great place for me to learn. But VR takes me to a better place to learn. So for me, that's my take on these two and why their uses in education should be fundamentally different, serving different purposes. So, I want to take a bit broader step and now kind of switch to a more general discussion about how technology, it's not clear when a new technology comes what to do with it and what effect it's going to have. So I'd like to bring attention to, 3 examples over history. And I'm not a historian, nor am I a historian of education specifically. But what we have here, we have a chalk, a slate that individual students would use in the 19th century and maybe even before. And that used to be the way students learned. They didn't have pencil and paper. Each student had one. And so a teacher would have to work with each student on an individual level. They might be in a classroom, but they're going student to student, working with them individually. It was actually a while before the big chalkboard came out. And when the big chalkboard came out, you would say, all right, well, it's not that, the technology is not that different. But what it actually did is it changed the way teaching took place, because now the teacher is teaching the class as a group. That's something, it's a fundamental change in that relationship. And it's not, and it didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. Fast forward much further, we get into the era now where we have like Coursera. And Coursera, the teachers involved in all 3 of these, the teachers are using all 3 of these tools. But the relationship that they have with the student is completely different. Now in Coursera, a teacher obviously creates the content, and some of our audience may have created that type of content, and it's going separate of the teacher. It's being delivered in an impersonal and independent manner. It doesn't mean that the quality is lower, but it means that relationship with the student is fundamentally different. So not every technology, though, has this type of transcendent effect, this transformational effect. And I want to bring attention, because we're talking about XR, I want to talk about this example of the stereoscope, because a modern VR headset is a really good modern stereoscope. It has stereoscopic vision, both eyes, so you get a sense of space, of depth. And, in the early 20th century, it was not, you could go to a class. I don't think it was common. You could go to a class where all the kids were just in love with the stereoscope. Man, I can see depth in an image. Even photos were relatively new. But this didn't take over. This didn't catch on. The stereoscope did not become a fundamental tool for teachers to use, at least not in my lifetime. And I think now, I still don't think VR in the classroom will be that either. Because again, the value proposition of VR or a stereoscope in before was to show me something far away. So show me a different environment. And that's not something that really fits if I'm in a room where I'm supposed to be in the room, and the room is designed for me and my classmates to interact and learn together. So the parallels between the two are explicit. Relatedly, why did television not become the dominant tool in the in the classroom environment? It's great, it's fast, it's standardized. Why did it not become, at least, and I don't know about Turkey, but I'm assuming most classrooms have not historically featured a television as a common major tool. In my life in the US, it did not. We would have one sometimes for announcement, but we wouldn't use it unless the teacher was gone and we would watch a film. We would watch some type of thing where we just sit quietly, don't bother the substitute, because the substitute doesn't know who we are. And they show us something. We could make the argument that video has become dominant now because of YouTube and Coursera and other things for outside of the classroom. But it's still not something that's dominant in the classroom, because teaching is performance. There is a long history where the person who stands in front of us and speaks to us demands our attention and has credibility. And this is important because in VR, if you're not interacting with other people, it's kind of, it's not boring, but it's passive. You're far more engaged when there's someone there speaking to you. That's a human. They're human. Like you're just attention. We are humans, and we're oriented to the motions and actions of other humans. That's in VR still true. just as it is outside. So that's a reason why when we see these platforms, these VR platforms, they often look just like a classroom. The problem is they are human, and we want to see a human, and we want to see the human act and speak and perform for us. But when I'm in a classroom, I can sit relaxed, I can look at my friends. I'm completely, everything outside of the classroom is preparing me to sit in a classroom. I sit in my home, in my car, the same way I sit, everything about it is I'm habituated to that experience. But in VR, I'm not that yet. So VR is a hassle. So if there's a barrier, if there's some effort for me to go into VR to see a performer, a human performer, that human performer has to be more valuable than they would if I was in a classroom. And that's where we go. That's the paradigm we're stuck in right now, where performance and presentation in VR has not developed substantially and is not good enough to justify for many people to be there. And that's what educators have to do. We have to have new forms of performance to match the new context in which we will start performing, whether that be in an augmented environment with the classroom looking and behaving differently, or in a virtual environment where the rules of physics are different. So there's a couple tools that, if anyone's interested in checking out a few things, here's links for different types of educational tools, whether AR or VR. And I want to thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you, Michael, for your very informative webinar. I mean, you asked appropriate questions, which make us think about concepts that we use a lot in edutech area. I mean, it's so good for us. If you have questions, we can look at that one. Sorumuz varsa Michael'a yönlendirebilirim. Also, I'm checking the YouTube live. Always says thank you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I'm very happy. It was good to prepare this talk. We talk about it a lot, but I haven't presented it recently. Just been talking about it in all the research we're conducting.
And you give the very good examples for us to compare the other side of the world and our country. But that was good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
I think we don't have any questions.
Great, cool. Well, then everybody enjoy the rest of the hackathon. Don't work too hard.
Thank you. Şu anda webinarlarımız